Oh, what's happening, everybody? Welcome into a brand new episode of Crossed Up. Anthony Sanfilippo's here. I'm Bob Wankel. And Anthony, I'm going to put you on the spot right off the jump here.
Here we go. Let's do it.
One word to describe the 2023 Phillies through 50 games.
Well, disappointing. I mean, to me, that's pretty cut and dry. I thought you were going to really challenge me there for a second. No, we're recording slightly earlier than we usually do, because I know you were fired up this morning, and I wanted to, and you wanted to kind of maybe challenge me there. But no, they're they're disappointing at this point.
I wanted to get right into it. Usually in the lead-in, I go through a little 45-second, this is what we saw, and I'm going to bring you in, and what do you think? And honestly, I have two words. I have two words right now. You hit one of them. And I guess it's a Captain Obvious question, but the other one is exasperating. I mean, this team, you watch this game play out against Atlanta, and it's one game, right? It's one game. So to get on a podcast and start ranting like a lunatic over one game, I think would be silly. But I just go back now, and let's just take the whole week and what we've absorbed this week with this 3-game series against Arizona, and then what we saw on Thursday night in Atlanta. And everyone's treating this game on Wednesday like it's the win of the season. It's going to spark them. And, oh, man, they avert the sweep, and now they can gain some momentum. Have you not been paying attention? Like, if you thought that Wednesday's game was all of a sudden going to spark a 10-game winning streak, you just haven't been paying attention. This is a team that has 3 starting pitchers right now. It's a team that's playing with a utility bench guy in the lineup, at least one every single night, sometimes 2. It's a team that cannot hit with runners in scoring position. And it's a team that, for whatever reason, whether it's Sir Anthony Dominguez, who I knew who had been on a pretty good run up until this past week against Arizona, and he looked okay last night, or Gregory Soto, who either looks like one of the nastiest relievers of all time or gives up a field goal when he comes in. Like, there's just not enough consistency with this team. They cannot do the little things consistently enough to overcome some of the talent deficiencies on this roster. I am mystified by this. Like, I really am. There's part of me that says, and here's my rant, there's part of me that says, this is a flawed team. What do you expect? Like, let's get real about what the Phillies are. They're a team that's probably going to hover around 500, and maybe they get hot or maybe they don't. But then there's also part of me that looks at the Schwarbers and the Castellanoses and the Real Mutos and Harpers of the world and expects more. And the Aaron Nolles of the world to not go out and give up 3 home runs last night, get tattooed across 6 innings. And what are you supposed to do? Applaud the fact that he hung in there and gave him a 5th and 6th, and they didn't get run out in the 4th? Like, is that the goalpost for Aaron Nola right now? So, I kind of just teeter back and forth between these two worlds of just accepting what this really is and still feeling like there should be a lot more there.
Well, I do think they are a flawed team, but I mean, who isn't a flawed team other than maybe the Braves, right? Yeah. Who they're playing, right? And Dodgers, but there's only a choice few teams that don't have flaws. So I'm willing to accept flaws. Right. And that's maybe why I tend to be a little bit more practical or a little bit more patient, I think, with this team at times. But you're right in the sense that who beyond Harper right now is living up to their expectation? Beyond Harper, who on this team right now is living up to their expectation? And I don't think
I'll give Bryson Stott in totality of his season. I will give Bryson Stott.
Okay.
That's about it. Real Muto's been aggravating at times, but I think overall, big picture has been kind
okay. Yeah, I mean, there's a few guys that have been okay. I mean, you probably put Castellanos into the okay category there too, right? A couple of the, I guess I would say, even lately, Kimbrel's been in that kind of, okay, fine, he's in that mode too. And then, even though he's hurt, I would say Alvarado probably fits in that. But other than that, no one else is living up to what they should be. There have been guys who've been close. There have been guys that have shown flashes. There are guys that are way the hell off. So that's where the disappointment comes in. That's where the exasperation, and you say they're exasperating. That's where the exasperation comes in. And this week is really especially so because you can tell against once it switched that they were playing Arizona. you could tell that they had a different mentality, that they knew they were playing good teams now, and if they were going to have to step it up and play at another level and do things differently. And you started to see it a little bit against the Diamondbacks, obviously the big comeback of everybody got excited about on Wednesday. And then you saw it some last night. I mean, they to their credit, they hit with the Braves last night. They against a left-handed pitcher. Granted, he's a rookie, right? And a rookie who has struggled, but they haven't hit that kind of pitcher all season. If you go back and look at the lefty starters they faced this year, there's a lot of guys with 6-point whatever ERAs, and the Phillies haven't hit them.
Absolutely.
Right?
I texted you before the series started. I said you can make an argument. That the first 3 games of this series, the Phillies actually have the advantage in terms of pitching matchups. And you were quick to point, yes, I hear you, but the first 2 guys throw from the left side, and we know what that has meant to this team to this point. So I do give them credit. And you're right, they did hit with the Braves a little bit, at least early on last night. And Kyle Schwarber late with the double that probably should have scored 2 runs. And I get that. And I give them a little bit of credit for falling behind 5-0 on Wednesday and grinding their way back. But I'm kind of tired of giving the Phillies their flowers for, well, they averted the sweep, or they didn't go 8 games under, or they competed with the Braves, who we know are better than they are. That's fine, but
yeah, and I think that the point here too is, Bob, is that maybe it's sobering to them a little bit. Maybe it's sobering to them. Maybe they're like, we are going out there like a little game like last night, and yeah, okay, you didn't get the greatest start from Nola, and Soto blew up in the 8th, and that that leads to 8 runs for the Braves, and they put up 5. But maybe they look at it and just say, yeah, this is what we are, and this is what we are right now is not good enough. Maybe this is the wake up that management needs to say, if we really want to be part of this going forward, something needs to change, and needs to change soon.
I was actually going to wait until the second half of the show to propose this to you, but I guess we've arrived at this point a little bit sooner. If the Phillies get swept by the Braves, and I don't foresee that. I think that they get one, maybe they get out of there with a split. I really thought that the split was the thing going in, but I kind of thought that last night was going to be a win in order.
Look, you're happy if you get a split out of the series. You're happy.
I agree. I understand they're playing from a position, a trailing position. They need to make up ground, but I don't think it's realistic to expect the Phillies to go into Atlanta, given what the Braves are, given how the Phillies have played, and think that they're going to win 3 out of 4 or have, certainly sweep the series. So a split, I think, is fine, but they're in danger here of you lose 3 out of 4. You find yourself 9 games back. You get swept. You're 11 games back. If I had to make a prediction right now, and I said it earlier this week, I would say that the Phillies, I still think, end up being one of those 3 wild card teams, because you look at the National League and you look at what they're competing against. Although I will tell you that I'm pretty convinced the Diamondbacks are going to be one of those 3 wild card teams. I don't want to get ahead of myself just because I saw the Diamondbacks win a series in Philadelphia this week, but I like that team. They don't give away at bats. The offense, it's not like the Diamondbacks show up a 10 spot against the Phillies in any of those 3 games, but you just watch the way they work. And I'm like, damn, there's something to it. I like their vibe right now. They're probably a starting pitcher away from maybe being a legitimate 88-win team, I think. But then beyond them, I mean, I see your face. I don't know. I know you've been Mr. Pro Diamondback. I don't know if you're walking back from that now.
I'm not walking back. I'm very pro Diamondback because I think that there's a lot there, and they're going to be a team that's going to be good for a while. I just don't.
You don't know that they're there yet. You don't.
I don't like their
them.
pitching at all. Other than Gallen and Kelly, I don't like the bullpen a little bit. I mean, you saw the one thing that you could if you watch those 3 games, that Torlavolo, who I like a lot as a manager, I think he's guessing on any given night. Nobody has a real role. He's just trying to figure it out. I mean, when you're trotting out 3 different guys to try and close out 3 different games, what does that tell you? And it's not like you say, oh well, that's the right matchup. It's these guys are just guys. It's Miguel Castro. It's Andrew Chafin. It's the Ruiz guy.
I hear you.
They're not good.
I also look at it and say that lineup actually gives consistently quality.
I love the lineup
energy, and it doesn't play with this malaise that you get out of this Phillies team.
Love the lineup.
And I know that a month or two from now, we could be talking about an entirely different story. Like, the one thing I will say, you use the term like red line players or red light players, I should say.
Yep.
And you saw that a little bit last night. Schwarber, as bad as he's been, he's in 168, comes up in a big spot, doubles him. Like, that's the thing. I think if you're a Phillies fan this morning, as bad as all of this has been, you're like, okay, when you get into these big spots, they do have players, veteran players that have been successful that tend to kind of rise to the occasion. I thought Alec Boehm last night, his home run early on, you're like, okay, when it really, really matters, we saw this team in big spots last year do it. There's a reason to believe maybe they can kind of reach back into that and do it again. But it's that consistency that just such erratic play that it makes me feel like that they might not. They might not.
I'll tell you, but the whole thing with this week, the eye opener for me is I watched how they've played and really competed. In all honesty, I mean, look, you could get frustrated by a couple of those losses against Arizona. There was the one game where defense kind of killed them a little bit, and you say, okay, well, that's stupid. But I look at it and I say, there's the Philly compete level, right? That we got, the thing that we fell in love with as a team last year, right? Not the resilience that we always talk about. It's there, it exists. But why does it only show itself when they play good teams? Like that, it's the difference, I think, between what you liked about the Diamondbacks and what you're not liking about the Phillies is the Phillies don't seem to turn that switch on all the time. They only feel like they have to when it's the most important time to do so. And at times, guess what? They're able to pull a loss out of a win out of a loss, right? But then there's also times like last night where they play a mostly good game but they can't guarantee that the pitching is going to come through when they think it's going to come through, and you lose a game because you're playing a really good team that's not going to fall off.
You're playing a team that's probably going to win 103 games this season.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Here's my thing, Anthony. Here's the difference.
Play like that against the Reds.
Yeah, and if you take care
of the Rockies,
if you take care of business against these lesser teams, you'll be in good shape. And there's no question about it. You don't have to win 3 out of 4 against teams like Atlanta to get to where you want to go. Well, as long as where you want to go is the postseason. If it's winning a division, then yes, like you actually do have to beat these elite level teams occasionally. But my problem is this: like, we can talk about resilience and talk about red light players, and we can talk about elevating your play when it matters and all of that. Well, first of all, they are 1-3 this week. So it's not like they've actually won these games. But the reason they're 1-3 is because you do see that compete level that you mentioned is there. I think it's there. They competed in those games against Arizona. They had opportunities in those games. They didn't do it. But it's hard to raise your compete level and actually win when you're number 1 or number 2 starter. And we're not doing this today. We're not going to do the Aaron Nola thing today.
He didn't pitch well yesterday.
I just want to talk about the one start. He wasn't good enough last night.
No, he wasn't.
Last night. You wake up and, dude has a 4.6 ERA. Like, it's Memorial Day now. Like, that's not good enough. And I'm not saying that he's not a good pitcher. I'm not saying they shouldn't resign. I'm not doing that today. But what I am telling you is that he was not good enough in the first game of a very pivotal series where they needed more than that last night.
Right. And look, and I'm the first one to defend him because I think people are overly critical of Aaron Nola, and you can't go. You shouldn't expect a guy like Nola to go into a game in Atlanta against this Braves team, against that lineup, and shut him out. Right? That's not going to. You shouldn't expect that. If it happens, that's unbelievable. But you shouldn't expect it. You got to expect he's going to give up a little bit, right? You got to expect he's going to give up 2 to 3 runs. Okay, fine. And so when the offense is putting up 5, that should be enough to win when you got a guy like Nola on the mound. The fact that he gave up 5 runs is not good enough. And you look at it, he hasn't given up 3 homers in a game since 2019. But the thing of it is to say, okay, you can sit there and go, all right, whatever. I mean, look, that kind of stuff happens against a good team. But the concern is that when you look at his velocity is way down again. And so when you have a difference in pitches of a fastball to a changeup that's only 2 to 3 miles an hour, that doesn't make your changeup or your fastball effective. I mean, yeah, he had that great inning where he struck out guys. He got 9 swings, 3 straight batters, and struck 3 guys out because his curveball was freaking awesome for 20 minutes. Like, right? And that's it. But aside from that, the fastball changeup, if you're throwing 90 and 88 and 90 and 87, Yeah, that's not good. That's not going to work. So something's got to give there.
But assuming it doesn't, like, let's just say that he doesn't find 2 to 3 miles an hour consistently on his fastball for the remainder of the year. Do they have enough here? Like, I think that's where I think that's ultimately what we're looking at. So people will say, like, come on, it's May 26th, you're overreacting. Or a lot of people aren't. They're actually, I don't want to say that everyone feels like that. There are actually a lot of people that are like, this team's fucked. Like, this is over. Like there is that sentiment. Now, I don't feel that way at all. I come into it and I understand why fans are frustrated. I understand why people are ready to rip their hair out. I understand why there's some doubt creeping in. I think that's all fair. I would not write this team off. I don't think we're anywhere close to that. I think you have to kind of pump the brakes and realize where they're at in relationship to other teams in the National League wild card. You have to understand that this team has whatever it is. I don't know how high the ceiling is, but they have not met that yet. Whatever the ceiling is, they have not come up to it. But the question I do think when you step back and look at this and say, can this team compete this season? If this is Aaron Nola, like, let's just say this is and I've heard the comparison made a few times now. He's 2009 Cole Hamels. Okay, that's what we're looking at here. He's a guy that went deep into the playoffs. He's still a really good pitcher. Let's assume that there's a bounce back in his future, but this year it might just be one of those years. If this is one of those years for Aaron Nola, can this team get there with a Zach Wheeler at 92% of what he's been? I mean, he's been pretty good running some bad luck, but he hasn't been vintage Zach Wheeler. And then you have all these question marks behind him. Like, we haven't even talked about what we got out of Ranger Suarez on Wednesday. And like, what do we take from that? So if Aaron Nola isn't Aaron Nola though, then what? Does it matter?
No, to answer your question, no. I mean, it's both those guys to be themselves. If Aaron Nola and Zach Wheeler are going to be, a one run higher ERA than we usually get from them for the remainder of the season, could they possibly still sneak in? Yeah. Are they going to make the run that they made last year? No, they just aren't. I mean, that's just no. I mean, that's the answer. I mean, they need them to be them, and they need other guys to do other things too. But if you expect to make the playoffs and then make a dent in the playoffs, make a run in the playoffs when you have zero starting pitching living up to its expectation, no, it ain't gonna happen. It's just not. Pitching is the game more than anything else. We go talk about home runs. We go talk about great lineups all you want. When it comes down to it, pitching is what matters the most. And if you don't have it at a level of expectation for the pitchers that you have, you're not winning anything.
So this is the second time. I actually thought we were going to get there about 5 minutes ago, and then I sort of detoured us. And now we're running up against what I want to come to right now, which is, okay, this is where they're at. They're 23-27. All that talk about the disastrous start under Joe Girardi, and they were 21-29 after 50 games. Well, they're only 2 games ahead of that pace right now. So if 21-29 was disastrous, this is on the brink of disaster. They're not going to fire the manager. So let's get that out of the way right now. Like, they're not going to fire the manager. And we had this conversation earlier this week. When things don't go well, when a team underperforms, and I get it. Like, I think it is fair to be critical of what you've watched, some of the lack of focus at times from this team, outfielders thrown to the wrong bases, base running issues early in the season. Seems like every starting pitcher came in behind schedule, hasn't been able to pitch to what people reasonably expected them, to pitch to in terms of numbers. There's I think a lot of criticisms that are probably at least fair to discuss. But they're not firing the manager, nor should they.
Right.
So what are they going to do? Because I think that one thing that most people are looking at here and saying is, this isn't going to get it done. And they pulled the fire the manager card last year, and it sparked them. And they're not going to be able to play that card this year. So what are they going to do? And so then you start to look at the personnel side of things. And before we dive into this, because this is really where I wanted to take the show today, like, how do you fix the Phillies? I've gotten a lot of messages, and I don't know if you have either, but I've gotten a lot of messages on Twitter about Kevin Long. And for all of this talk about how he's the best hitting coach in Major League Baseball, and he's a savant and he's able to untap all this potential with players that haven't figured it out. You look up and you see the runners in scoring position issues. Certain players have just not met their expectations. Trey Turner's been a disaster. Hey, what's up with the hitting coach? Maybe it's time to unload him. And the only thing I would say to that, and I actually, responded to a couple people, and I just said, listen, this is one of the most well-respected hitting coaches in baseball. The players rave about the guy. It's been 50 games. They're coming off of a World Series appearance. Let's just say, even if you wanted to make that change, which they don't, but if you wanted to make that change, what does it look like to the rest of the league, to the rest of the industry, when you have a well-respected, reputable hitting coach who's loved by his players coming off of a World Series appearance and you let him go? If you're a good hitting coach, you're like, oh, yeah, let me line up to take the Phillies job after I saw that go down. Like, it just doesn't work that way. Now, I'm also the guy that probably, to some extent, I didn't go full Rosenthal last year and say changing the manager isn't going to help this at all. It's not going to fix the problems. The players play, the manager manages. Like, it mattered. There was a tangible, real difference. You could see it, you could feel it when they made the change last year. So I'm not saying that changing coaches can't work or doesn't work. But in this case, I don't see that whatsoever at all. Like, Cotham, Long, Thompson, I don't see it. I just don't think I do not think that is a fix.
No, I think you're spot on with that. More so with Long than with Cotham, but I think both are very safe. I do think that there can be some questions that you ask about the pitching side of things. Obviously, with the pitching being so inconsistent and not being where it's at, and if we're going to flash back 2.5 months to the famous elevator ride when they knew in spring training that the pitching wasn't what it needed to be, right? And so then you got to question the off-season plan and everything else that happened. So maybe there's an undercurrent of concern that or something that could happen there. But I still don't think it's where it needs. That either one of them are in danger. So no, that's not going to happen. So if we're trying to fix the Phillies, firing an assistant coach or the secondary coach, that's not going to happen. So then you say, okay, well, what's next?
I will say, like, the only thing I will say, a lot of it for me is about time frame and sample. Like, if you get to the end of this year and the Phillies win 73 games and they're a bottom 8 offense, like, there's going to be some hard questions that get asked, and there's going to be some hard decisions to make. And I'm not saying that these guys are Teflon and that nobody could ever, because the 2022 Phillies made the World Series, you can't ever make a change on this group. I'm not saying that. I'm saying 50 games in, that's way premature. That's my point.
Correct, and your point is well taken. So then what you say is then, well, then what can you do? And this is where Dombrowski gets tested, right? Because when he's faced these situations in the past, he's burned his system in the sense of, okay, I need to go get players, and I will trade away our better prospects and empty the cupboard. He has been resistant to that since he's gotten here because he knew he had to rebuild this system, right? He knew he had to rebuild the cupboard and refill it, and because the Phillies farm teams have not been good over the past few years. But now, Bob, you look at it, the Clearwater Threshers are blowing through low A. I mean, they're dominating. They're the best team in low A baseball. It's not even close to how good they are. So there's obviously some really good talent down there at that level, which is good for the Phillies down the road, right? That's great. But how can you use that to help the team now? Do you then make the decision to part ways with some of that future talent that is obviously pretty good and help this current major league roster? Or do you say we're rebuilding this so that this doesn't get to be like it was 4 years ago, 5 years ago, where you have nothing in your system? And I think that's where we're coming to his Waterloo, right? He has to make a decision on what's the most important thing for the franchise. I'm curious,
So I think there's a few different ways to approach this. The first one is they're not going to do anything drastic in the next, I don't think, at least until the middle of June.
Correct.
Right? Like,
correct. And maybe even longer.
Real. The bulk of deals get done mid-July.
Maybe even longer. Yeah.
Right. We're probably 45 days out from really talking about reshaping a roster, adding, subtracting. But if you wanted to get aggressive and get ahead of this thing and say, we need that jolt, we need it now, you probably start entertaining these conversations the middle of next month.
Yeah.
Okay. So the first thing is going to be, is it worth it? Is it worth entertaining these conversations about making meaningful additions by the time it comes, by the time we get to a point where it actually, you can engage in these conversations and make such a deal? If the Phillies are 9-10 games under 500 with a veteran-laden group, a very expensive one to boot, I don't think that you're necessarily just because you came in 2023 as a defending National League champion and have all these playoff aspirations and championship aspirations, I don't think that makes it an automatic buy. I just don't. Yeah. I think that the situation's obviously going to dictate that. Now, I don't know what the situation's going to be, so let's just focus on what we know right now. Let's just say, and I think this is pretty reasonable because we've talked about resilience, their ability to not let it get out of control. I kind of am a little bit bearish on their ability to get 10 games over 500 anytime soon. So, let's just assume they're sort of where they're at right now. They're hovering around a wild card spot, outside looking in. Is this a matter of, let's go out and how many times are we going to hear the name Lucas Giolito over the next 6 to 8 weeks?
Yeah.
Is this a matter of going out and doing that and just bringing in addressing the need, go get a right-handed bat, go get Lucas Giolito, and that'll be enough to get this team where it wants to go? Or is it a situation where you kind of do what you did last year, where you get some fringe pieces, maybe you get a little bench help, maybe you get somebody that can stabilize the back end of your starting rotation, a veteran type? Or, and this is the third one, this has always been my favorite card. This is my favorite card up until late last season, which is there something off with this clubhouse? Is there something that needs to be changed that is a little bit of an eye-opener, is a little bit of a wake-up call? Is there a part that is pretty prominent on this team that might not be here come the end of this season? Do they even have that player? Does that player exist? Does his contract allow him to enter such a conversation?
Do you have someone you're going to suggest?
I don't.
Okay. All right.
Do you?
No. No, I don't.
Because the contract, there are a couple players where I'd say, sometimes I think a team actually just needs to see a piece go to say, oh shit, it's a new world here that we're living in. But I just don't think from a contractual standpoint that they have a piece that really makes sense that you'd say this will rattle the clubhouse a little bit. I don't see it. I don't see that, Bob, because I look at it and you look at the guys who are really locked in here, right? I mean, they're not going to. The only player who really fits that description you were talking about is a pitcher, and that's Nola. But you're not. If that's where your weakness is, you're not going to trade. Can you imagine a scenario where they're 8 games under 500 at the trade deadline, and they say, "Hey, Aaron, you're not getting $200 million."
Well, that's a different conversation. Right? If you reach the deadline and you decide you're pulling the plug on the season, I think then we're going to be having a whole different conversation then. But if you're talking about right now, that
is what I'm talking
right, about. Then no, it's not going to happen. That's not where you're going to trade from. And when you look at the position players, the guys that you have here, you're pretty committed to them, for the next few seasons, because this is the core that you've put together to try and win with, and you still believe you can win with this core, and I do too. I don't, we all do. I think still really believe that this group can win. So I don't know who that would be that you can trade from the team and say that will wake this team up if we move such and such a player. No, so
I agree with you, and I'm not necessarily advocating for that. I think in certain situations, though, those types of shakeups work, but I don't think on this team, this roster, financial commitments that they have. And by the way, and I think it is worth saying that one of the things that we sort of applauded with this team was that clubhouse dynamic. So I don't want to say a year later, all of a sudden after 50 games, you got to go blow that up either. But I do think you have to. What I don't think you can do is just say, well, it's just 50 games. It's early. We did this last year. Like, I don't think that that's an acceptable way to look at what has happened with this team. I just don't. I think that that's lazy. I think it's just it's wishful thinking is what it is.
No, and the thing of it is, Bob, is and I was trying to, identify this a little bit. I've been trying to look at it and say, what is that thing that's missing? Because we all feel it. We all know that there's just something that's not right there. And, because I've looked at how they've played against the better teams, and I've looked at how they've played against the weaker teams. And they're 8-16 against winning teams, and they're 15-11 against non-winning teams. And you sit there and say 15-11 against bad teams is not good enough. You probably need a couple more wins there. 8-16 against good teams is not good enough. You probably need a couple more wins there. Look, you could hover around 500 against good teams if you go through almost everybody's schedule and you look at how they play against winning teams. Most teams are going to be right around 500 against other winning teams. It's just the way it is. But they beat the hell out of the bad teams. Okay, so if the Phillies right now, the thing is they're not playing well enough against either group. And it's just like all that we just need is a little. But if they just were a little bit better against both groups, then we wouldn't be sitting here as concerned, because we'd probably be saying, "Hey, guess what? 27-23 is okay."
So
you know what I'm saying, right? If you get two more wins against each group, you're 27-23, and it's like, all right, that's not bad. That's not a bad start.
Good about that.
Yeah, you feel good about it.
I don't know, the valley between where they're at and where they want to be, when you look at it through that lens, it's not that far apart. It's not that wide.
Right. It's a fine line.
But it's also not good enough. And they are on the wrong side of it right now.
Correct. Yes.
So they fortunately will be allotted more time to figure out whether or not they can kind of get to where they want to go with this current construction. But I think regardless, you come back to the point that they need to add. They're going to need to make an addition here. Mm-hmm. So if that's the case,
how many additions do they need to make?
I think at least two. I think at least two. But the problem goes, this is almost like a circular conversation. You started at the top talking about this is now the dilemma that Dave Dombrowski's met with. Do you dig into that minor league system? Do you deplete some of that depth and the progress that you've made over the last couple years here, kind of propping this thing up? The system is not a top 10 system. It's probably not a top 15 system, but it's also not a bottom 3 system anymore.
Right.
They've made significant progress on this front. I don't think that they do a deal of consequence without involving one of Griff McGarry or Mick Abel.
Correct.
Because Painter's here. He is not going to be traded.
Right.
So if you have this depth and you're touting these three guys as all potential top of the rotation, middle of the rotation pieces, one of them has to go. You don't want to trade these guys, but if you need an immediate fix and it's a player that's going to move the needle for you in 2023, it's going to have to hurt a little bit. So I don't see any team engaging the Phillies on a meaningful piece without insisting upon one of those two starting pitchers.
Yeah, I agree with you 1,000%. It's just like what they did last year when they, nobody wanted them to trade Logan O'Hoppe, right? Everybody liked O'Hoppe. Everybody heard all great things about him, but they had to move him to get Marsh. So you're going to have to give up something to get something. And so whether you're trading for Lucas Giolito or anybody else for that matter, who's going to come in and stabilize a relationship or add some power to the lineup or whatever, you're going to have to give up one of those guys. I just think that it's an automatic. But can you give up other players too? Can you maybe convince teams, hey, take two prospects below those guys, but we'll give you like the next two, like 4 and 5 prospects instead of
the issue
1,
is,
2,
I
3.
think, because you probably need to make two fairly significant additions here. So not only are you going to burn through, and they won't do both. I think that 2 of the 3 between Painter, McGarry, Abel stay. Painter being one of them, pick the other one.
Right.
I don't see them just saying like, hey, like let's just deplete all of this. But then beyond that, like you got guys like Johan Rojas and Carlos De La Cruz, who's kind of surged here up the prospect boards. Like those are the types of players that you may have to get involved with if you want to do this. And again, there's a lot of different considerations. Are you taking on a 1-year rental or a half-season rental, or are you taking on somebody that has a little bit of control beyond this year? And that'll probably dictate how much, and I'm not saying anything revolutionary here, but that's probably going to dictate the level of hurt that you're willing to incur in order to do such a deal. But I just think that if you're looking at this team right now, you absolutely need another starting pitcher that has some legitimate upside. I'm not talking about a stopgap number 5 journeyman. Do not bring me Noah Syndergaard this year. And it's nothing about Noah Syndergaard. He helped them win last year. His numbers weren't great, but
that's what they needed last year, right? They needed. Go ahead. I know.
What about the Mick? They traded away the Mick.
I know, Mickey Moniak. I think he had a go-ahead home run from the Angels the other day.
Yeah, let's talk about Mickey Moniak in a month. Get back to me in a month.
Yeah, I know. I agree. But no. I agree. But the difference is like last year, Nolan and Wheeler were going well enough that you just said, and Suarez for that matter, that you didn't need a top of the rotation pitcher. You just needed a back of the rotation guy. Well, now you need a guy closer to the top than you did closer to the bottom. That's what you need right now, but just because the pitching has not been what it needs to be. So you're right. You need that. And you probably need a right-handed power bat that can play one of 4 positions, first base, third base, left field, right field. I mean, that's what you need, right? So those are the 2 things that they need more than anything. They probably will need a third thing, eventually, but maybe that is a back of the rotation guy. We'll see.
Isn't it amazing?
What happens,
like Dave Dombrowski, you're sitting here and saying, like, all right, I'm getting my minor league system incrementally better. I have had a lot of money to spend. You're coming into this season probably sometime around mid-January.
Yeah.
You're really like, what do I have here? And you go, man, Hoskins, Harper will come back around the All-Star break.
Yeah.
Real Muto, Castellanos. I believe in Nick. I believe in Nick's bounce back. Kyle Schwarber. I just got Trey Turner. Bryson Stott and Alec Bohm are going to take a step forward. My God, this offense is going to be unbelievable. It's going to be relentless. And here we are 50 games in saying if the Phillies don't go out and get an impact middle of the lineup bat from the right side, they can't win.
Yeah.
I mean, that's insane what has happened to this team. And certainly it's all about Rhys Hoskins and him going down when he went down, too. It's not like he went down during the first week in November at the end of the World Series where you have 4 months to figure it out.
Right. Now he went down right before the start of the season. Yeah.
I've made this point a couple times, and I guess it's so obvious. It's like, why do you even need to say it? But I knew that injury would hurt at the time. I did. I had no clue. I had no idea that reverberation that you would feel off of it. I mean, it is killing them right now.
It is. And I felt like they had the players to get by with it. And I still do. In a lot of ways, I do. Because obviously, when we looked at it at the time, we're like, well, okay. I mean, you basically take the same lineup as last year and just replace Hoskins with Trey Turner. And so, I mean, your power numbers might be down a little bit, but you're probably even better.
A 30 homer guy, Turner's a 20 homer guy, but the upgrade that you get in Turner's other skills.
Yeah, right. I mean, it was like, okay.
No, I mean, it's rooted in logic.
Yeah, and then so I think obviously Turner hitting 244 so far and not even be able to get on base and everything else, all his struggles. I mean, I think that's compounded the missing Rhys Hoskins.
Can I deliver a take now that it took us 38 minutes, 39 minutes before we got to Trey Turner?
Yeah, go ahead.
He obviously hits the home run on Wednesday, and it's a good moment for him and a great sound clip. A lot of good sound bites from Trey Turner this week.
Yeah.
I think it was after the game Tuesday night. He says, I've sucked, more or less, paraphrasing, but
no, he said it.
I've sucked.
I've sucked.
And then, talking about his mom booing him after that at bat that he had before he hit the home run on Wednesday. I see a player who is disappointed in himself, understands why people are upset with him, is reasonably accountable, wants to play better. Like, I think from what you want to hear an athlete say, and you want him to feel what the fans feel in terms of frustration, it's all there.
Yeah.
But this idea, and I was guilty of this on Sunday when I covered the game, he doubled into the right center gap late. And I said, maybe that's the swing that gets him going. I wrote that in the story, but I also put like an asterisk in front of it. We've said this a lot this year. Mm-hmm. Every time there's a multi-hit game or a couple bloops fall in, you say, maybe this is going to be what gets him going. And so he has this moment on Wednesday, his first really big moment with the Phillies. And he hits a spinner up in the zone. It was a cookie. And I'm not going to take anything away from a guy, especially one that's been struggling to the extent that he's been. But he kind of just did what he was supposed to do against just a god-awful pitch. And he ties the game. And then immediately afterwards, I think that, what was weird about Wednesday's game was, like, I felt like it was the first time that the Philadelphia media at large, like, paid attention to the Phillies. Like, everyone gets on the radio, like, this is a huge win. It could be a season-defining win. I'm like, have we just reached the point where we're done talking about the 76ers? So now we're going to overreact to what we're seeing about the Phillies? Because that's, to me, the way I read it. Like,
sure.
I like Joe Giglio a lot. Like, I'm a big fan of him. I think that he gets a lot of – I understand why people do not love some of the things that he brings to the table. But I think he's a smart guy, and even if he makes it a point that's aggravating as hell, he can defend it well. So I'm listening to that show, though, and he gets on and he's, this is a huge win, and like, could this be the one that turns the Phillies around? And I heard the camera in the morning talking about the same thing, a couple of writers. I'm like, what are we? It's one game, and like, he was 1 for 5.
Yeah, everybody wanted it to be the Angels game last year.
The jumping point, the jump-off point on the video yearbook.
Yeah, that's what they want, and that's what they're looking for, and and you get it, right? Because you didn't expect this team to be struggling like it is, and so you're looking for that moment that gets it going in the other direction. And so, well, maybe that's it. You come back from a 5-0 deficit. Trey Turner, who struggled for 48 games, all of a sudden he's the hero. And everybody goes in the other direction.
It's a great story.
It is a great story.
You want it to play out. If you're invested in this team, of course you want that to be the thing that gets him going and gets the Phillies going.
Yeah.
What did he do last night?
He was 0 for 5, right?
So I don't think that we can. I don't think we can do this anymore. I don't think we can do is that going to be the swing that turns him around? What's going to turn him around is him doing the work, being more selective at the plate, stop chasing everything. It's simple. It's not about, I don't think that his problems are, and maybe it's part of the equation. Maybe it's a very small part of the equation, but I don't think this is about him getting in the box and saying, like, my contract and my expectations.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I 30 million and there's a fan booing me. And so I'm not going to I can't get a hit. I don't believe in myself. I don't think it's that at all. I just think he's a guy that's literally swinging at everything. And maybe there is something to say about pressing and how that translates to expanding the strike zone to astronomical chase rates. But one swing isn't going to fix this. It's about consistency. Mm-hmm. It's about a consistently better approach. And whether or not he runs into a spinner up in the zone and belts it over the left field wall to tie a game in a big spot, like it's not that simple.
Do you know that he's second in Major League Baseball in 0-2 counts this year?
Because he just gets in the box and it's foul off a hittable pitch or chase one that's out of the zone. I mean,
by the way, do you know who's first?
Stott.
Yes. Yeah. So the Phillies have the top 2 guys who are batting 1-2 in their lineup, facing the most 0-2 counts in baseball. And you wonder why the lineup struggles a little bit, right?
It brings me to this point. I actually tweeted this out before the horrendous Trey Turner at bat. So it was 2 at bats prior to the home run. But we're at a point with him where I don't think he should be hitting at the top of the order anymore. And I don't mean leadoff, I mean second. And I know that the immediate response is going to be, well, who should? And I get that, because it's not like that this lineup is full of hot hitters or an obvious replacement. You talk about what can the Phillies do? Well, if they can't make a blockbuster trade to elevate the roster, and they're not going to ship somebody out of here that has a lot of clout in the clubhouse, and you don't want to hit like panic buttons, but I do think that one thing that they can do without firing people or changing the coaching staff is say, okay, we're 50 games into this. And I'll give them the Atlanta series too. Like I'll let this play out through Sunday. Let's see what they do. They wake up on Monday morning, 11 games behind the Braves, 9 games behind the Braves. They lose 3 out of 4, get swept. I do think it's fair at that point to say, let's take apart all of the different puzzle pieces from this lineup. Let's not go on what we thought these guys were going to be. Let's go on what they currently are. And I think that you have to make a serious consideration about not just tweaking a lineup, but potentially totally reconstructing the way it's built. Trey Turner does not see many pitches. His chase rate is insane. He does not put the ball in play enough. He's not hitting for power. He's not stealing bases when he is on. What has Trey Turner done in 2023 that justifies hitting him second, hitting him in front of Bryce Harper right now? The one guy that you feel like is a true, legitimate offensive threat, you are putting a brutal, brutal hitter in front of him. A good hitter, a guy that I think when it's all said and done in the back of the baseball card and asterisk disclaimer, I'm not overreacting. But right now, hitting Trey Turner in front of Bryce Harper is fucking insane.
You're not wrong. You're not wrong. He's got to get moved down. Again, and I've said this before, we talked about this with Schwarber when Schwarber was struggling. You know, sometimes you move a guy down, even if it's temporary, just to get him right. You know, let him. I'm a believer in letting a guy hit through his struggles and hit through his, you know, especially when you have a track record, right? But that doesn't necessarily mean that they have to be in prime spots in the lineup while they're doing it. You know, you can move a guy down, figure it out. When it starts to turn around, okay, now we can move the guy back up. Right. Totally. And so, like, I think that that's what the Phillies need to do. And I think it's a flaw in their approach. That's something look, it worked last year. We know, right? But even if you go back before that, the seasons before that, when you had guys who were struggling and you left them in those spots, it didn't help. It more often than not, it hurts. Okay, more often than not. So therefore, you have to make a change.
You're very tied in with the Flyers. You have close relationships over the years with a lot of different people in the organization. Good rapport with players. You've always been fair. I only know what I know through a high school level. My thing is this: I've heard it said, well, if you take Trey Turner out of the 2 spot, you're going to kill his confidence. You're taking a player who's already doubting himself, and you're really going to tell him, hey, we don't believe in you. We're going to let you play through it because we have no other choice, but we don't really believe in you, so we got to move you out of the 2 hole. I disagree with that. And I just wonder, and I know that every athlete's a little bit different, and I'm sure that Trey Turner wants to hit at the top of the lineup. Like, he's one of the coming into the season, I'd say he's one of the 30 best players in Major League Baseball. He deserves to hit at the top of the lineup. But based on where he's at right now, let me just present a scenario to you, and you tell me if this is just fantasy land. I'm Rob Thompson. I bring in Trey Turner. I say, hey, Trey, look, here's the deal. You've acknowledged, that you're not playing as well as, and this isn't exactly how the conversation would go, but like, hey, you've acknowledged that things aren't going well. We all know that. We all know that you're a much better player than this. Here's what I want to do. Here's what we think is probably best for the team right now. We think it would be best if we slot you down to 6 or 7. You probably don't want to do that. This is going to take some of the pressure off of you. We know you're going to get right. When you get right, we'll get you back in the spot where we believe that, you should be. Is that conversation overly simplistic, or are we to assume that he is, or players in general are such like that there's like a diva quality? They're so self-absorbed that they would say like, how dare you? I know that I have a horrible chase rate and I'm on pace for 200 strikeouts and our team is wildly underachieving, but I'm Trey Turner, goddammit, and I'm hitting first or second. You can go fuck yourself. Like, is that how that conversation's going to go?
No, I don't get the sense that he's that kind of guy. Right? I think there are players. I think there are players who are like that, and obviously you have to take each individual personality into account a little bit differently when you have those conversations. But I don't get the sense that Turner is like that at all.
But
right?
Even if he wasn't, you're like, okay, you're here for the next 11 years. So like, let me ask you this, because I don't think he's that guy either. But let's just say, for the sake of argument, that he is. Be angry. Be angry. Show me how stupid I am for proposing that solution. Like, is he going to just turtle up and then what, hit 140 the rest of the year? Like, I don't see I think you have to be honest with players. Like, I don't think you just, you know what I mean? Like, I don't think you just, and I from what I understand, this used to happen with a manager, maybe the last two managers. The lineup card would just go up and 2 became 6 and 7 became 1, and you never understood why, and there was no explanation. It wasn't conveyed. But you look a guy in the eye and say, like, I want you to succeed. We believe in you. We just got to do this right now. And you're a man about it, and you're an open book, and you're transparent, and you talk through it and show respect. I mean, shouldn't there be enough there that's a workable solution?
I agree. I think, and I do. I believe that if the Phillies went that path, they would not get resistance from Turner. They wouldn't. I don't. I don't get the sense from just talking to Trey, and seeing how the kind of guy he is. And again, he's very accountable, and the things that he says, and he's a guy that I believe would. I mean, he'd do it. He'd go down. He might not be happy about it, but I don't think he would. I think he would put team first by all in all certainty. He would put team first.
The only part of this that I'm torn on, well, I guess I'm torn on two things, but the first part is, like, I'm willing to give him this series. Like, if Trey Turner over the next 3 games goes, I don't know, 1 for 14, I think it's probably time to really do this. I'm willing to go through this Braves series, and I know it's almost kind of crazy because you're like, you have to optimize now. You have to do everything you can to win these games now. This is a really, really important series. But I'm almost like, let's see it against this team. Like, you guys showed a little bit of fight last night. There were some positives to take away from it. It wasn't good. You didn't win the game. We're not handing out trophies for that. But there were some good things happening. And you did hit that home run on Wednesday. I'm not going to do it to you the next game. I'm not going to do it to you 2 games after that. I'm going to give you this 4-game series. Let's see what it looks like.
Mm-hmm.
Come Monday morning, if they don't get that result, I do think it's something that they really have to consider at that.
Yeah, and I don't think it's a big switch either. I mean, it really, in all honesty, the lineup that they have kind of going right now is probably, the right lineup. If assuming, again, we're always assuming that you can't move Bryce Harper out of 3, right? So if you're locked into Harper at 3, the way you have the lineup now, it works. With that once, but you got to flip Turner with somebody. You probably flip him with Bohm,
right?
Yeah, you flip him with Bohm, and everything else can stay the same. So you're really not screwing up the whole. You're not putting the whole lineup in a blender and then coming up with something brand new. You're just making one change. Bohm has had some success out of the 2-hole. I think he's hit like 288 or something like that when he's batted second in his career. So it's not like it's a guy that's unfamiliar with the spot. Bohm's not a prototypical 2-hitter, but it's okay. I mean, again, we're talking something just until Turner gets right, and then you can flip it back again. And then you bump Turner down to 7, and that's just it, man. You put him in that spot. And look, think about it. Bohm bats 7 now and has batted there most of the season. And think about all the opportunities that he's had in that spot. Yeah. And that's something else you could sell to Turner a little bit. Be like, look, the way our lineup is constructed, Alec Bohm has come up with runners in scoring position more than anybody else. He leads the team in RBI, right? I mean, so you're going to still get your chances to make an impact. It's just we're trying to get people on base ahead of Bryce early. That's what we're trying to do.
And this should be said, because if you're listening to this and I don't put this out there, you're going to say, well, guys, yes, the idea is to put players on base in front of Bryce. Alec Boehm, over his last 7 games, has a 250 on base percentage.
Yeah.
Over the last 15 games, he has a 295 on base percentage. Over his last 30 games, he has a 275 on base percentage. Alec Boehm has not been, I know he hit a home run last night. He's actually, he's been better, I think, lately. He's not walking at all, though.
No.
And,
He's
not getting on base enough. So Alec Boehm is an imperfect solution to hit ahead of Bryce Harper. Could you consider JT Realmuto in that spot? Maybe.
He doesn't walk. He doesn't walk either. The problem is the 3 guys that walk in this lineup are all left-handed.
And so if your counterpoint to me is then none of these guys have the numbers to warrant it. Now you're just making a change to make a change. I'd say I hear you. I do. Fair point. Sometimes though, we've seen it in the past. Sometimes these cosmetic changes, sometimes changes for the sake of change, can provide a little jolt. And they're at a point where they kind of need a little jolt. And status quo isn't working. So what is the downside? That would my counter then would be, what's the downside to trying for 6 games, 2 series? Let's just see.
No, absolutely.
And I think that's where they're at. And it sucks because it's not rooted in logic. It's not rooted in numbers. It's not rooted in analytics. It's rooted in like a throw it against the wall and just hope that the result's a little bit better.
Yeah, I mean, and this is why, I gave the caveat that I gave, because keeping Harper 3 and not being willing to bat 2 lefties in a row limits this group entirely. Completely limits this group entirely.
The only thing is, if you're going to go Stott Harper 1-2, I don't love it because I know that Bryce Harper can hit left-handed pitching, and I don't think that we should be scared of lefty-lefty matchups with Bryce Harper. But where he's at right now, the splits are crazy. I mean, he has not found his timing yet against left-handers, and he's been awesome against righties. Mm-hmm. So I'm like, I'm more okay pairing up Bryce lefty-lefty once he kind of gets it figured out. But right now, I actually do think the repercussions of doing that would be fairly significant.
Yeah. So what if you slide him down to 4 and put Stott at 2?
2, yeah. I mean, listen, it's a consideration. I've said that there has to be a willingness by these guys.
He batted 4 in the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, like there's got to be a willingness to say, listen, we need to optimize what we have. This is not working. The current mix isn't working, but it's always been like the one thing that feels very rigid is him hitting third, because we know that there's a preference there and you tend to defer to that. But certainly you've seen Bryce here since he's come back. He's been very good. He's been very productive. The frustration, both in his mannerisms and I think in some of what he has said, is palpable. I think it's quite obvious that he is very upset with the way that this has gone. I think that the frustration is real. There's got to be a part of him that's like, I busted my ass to come back 6 weeks earlier than anybody would have ever reasonably thought. I'm doing my job and we're not winning. Like he's not perfect. Like he's got to take some blame in it, but he's holding up his end of the bargain. And there's got to be internally some part of him that's like, what the hell, guys? Like, I didn't come back for this.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at what Harper's done so far, I mean, I have a hard time finding a game where I go, oh, man, Bryce just didn't deliver when we needed him to deliver there. Like, I mean, he's been really, really good. Really good. And like you said, it's been otherworldly against right-handed pitching right now. I mean, it's crazy good against righties. But, yeah, like, I mean, so like, maybe he feels a little bit like I've done everything that I possibly can. And you would think adding me back, I mean, the team was better before he got back. They were 15-13, right? Or whatever, at one point. And since Harper's gotten back in the lineup, it's just like, okay, we just stop hitting now because Bryce is back. It's the NBA stand around and watch the superstar play.
Yeah,
it's what it really turned into, right, with this lineup, and that's got to be his frustration, I would think at this point.
It would be mine. I haven't lived the life of a superstar athlete that succeeded at a an impossibly high level for a decade, but I would think that him challenging himself to get back on the field as quickly as he did to try to repeat what happened last October, and then you have what happened last May happening again. I just don't think he ever thought that was going to be possible.
Right. Right.
So yeah, I mean, it's interesting times. We could talk Monday and they could win the next 3, and we all feel great about this, and they're 5 out, and who knows? I'm like I said, I kind of want it to go through the Braves. I would not make any big change against this Braves team. Like, let's see what we have. Let's see if how our formula stacks up. I suspect I know how this is going to play out, and I do think at that point you are well within your right as a coaching staff, as an organization, to say, okay, we've now got to do something, and that's got to be the first thing, because that trade, you can't just pull that lever on May 30th.
No,
I don't think so.
I don't think you can either. I think you're looking at something that's still a few weeks down the line.
Yeah, but there's got to be some kick in the ass here, and I don't think that a closed door meeting, players only meeting, pointing at one another. I mean, that's probably happened to some degree. I'm sure there have been some conversations internally that have been like, this is not good enough.
I think I wrote the line the other day, right? It was like, hey, sometimes a kick in the ass is more than a slap on the wrist.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I mean, it just needs to be.
Yeah.
So.
Well, there you go. All's well in Phillies land this morning. Give me your one last thing. What are you?
Yeah.
What new thing are you upset about this?
What are we going to bitch about today?
Yeah.
Aaron Boone got tossed out of another game yesterday. It's the 4th one this year, 2nd this week, and I can't say that. And while I don't think he's a good manager, I can't say that I disagree with him. And we saw something at the end of the Phillies game, or at the end of the Phillies game on Wednesday, that was a bit ridiculous. And we've been seeing it a lot this year, Bob. For whatever reason, and I think I know what the reason is, but I want to kind of pick your brain a little bit. Umpiring behind the plate this year has been the worst I've ever seen it. And it's been bad in recent years, right? But this year specifically, they are missing more calls than I've ever seen them miss before. And then you add in the fact that they're still an elitist group of guys, right? Where how dare you question?
How dare you question?
Yeah, question anything that I've done here because I'm perfect, and it turns into the ump show, and it makes it that much more aggravating for people like us who are watching the games. Why is it happening, and can it be fixed?
It's happening because umpires are not solely focused on calling balls and strikes anymore. They are dealing with, am I enforcing the pitch clock? Am I enforcing the pace of play? Am I making sure that substance checks? Like I think Major League Baseball has placed such an emphasis on game flow that and it's new to them. It's a new test it's a new reality that they have not previously had to deal with. So your focus is not always on what is happening in front of you behind the plate. It's the clock. Is he on the rubber? Is the batter engaged in the box in time? And so when you have to take all of that information and because you know that that's the point of emphasis, now you have to bear down and make a call. One thing I will say about umpires in general is it is a very difficult job. We get these umpires at the high school level. They come down, they're doing the best they can. These games start at 3:30 in the afternoon. There's not a great amount of people to pick from. Some guys that are probably pretty good at it work other jobs. I'm always mindful of that, but then I go crazy sometimes when I see some of the calls behind the plate or like not knowing rules. I try to be mindful of that. You get to the major league level, you expect not perfection, but reasonably consistent, good quality work behind the plate. And I think it was in the Boone game where he gets ejected, it was Schmidt who was on the mound. Yeah. I think I read that there were like 6 or 7 pitches throughout his entire start that were on the edge of the strike zone that were called as balls. And you, as a manager, like that could be 2 outs. That could be the difference between 7 innings of 1-run baseball and 5 innings of 4-run baseball. and you're making my guy go deeper and longer and work harder. And I get the frustration, but I think it's information overload, and then it's taking away from what's happening on balls and strikes.
Yeah. I
Big
mean,
call in the 8th inning of that Phillies game last night was Soto. Now, I know he was behind 3-0, and I'm not sitting here saying that, and he was all over the place, and it was his fault. What happened was his fault.
No, but if he has another pitch there, you don't know. Does he get that? Does he get the guy out? Does he get him to pop up? Does he get him into a ground with double play? Like, there's a lot of things that can happen in those spots, right? I mean, one missed pitch can change the whole dynamic of an at-bat.
It's part of the game. I have a hard time with, that's just part of the game. Well, why? Why are these momentum shifting calls that when you have the technology, when you have the means, this is 1977 where a guy can get 7 inches off the plate because he is who he is, because he's Nolan Ryan. You know what I mean? Like, you have technology that can, and I'm not sitting here even like advocating for robot umpires, but like this shit has to be right. And by the way, like, I don't want to take this too far off track, but like, I always come back to like regulated sports betting, legalized sports betting. These are like real markets. When you bet on sports, you have to prepare for things that there are things that happen in the course of a game that when you bet money, like, you just got to deal with it. That's the way it works. Guys get hurt, bad calls are made. But like, I think that leagues have a whole different set of problems on their hands here. It's one thing to say like, well, it determined that at bat, it determined that inning. But like, when people are like winning and losing hundreds of dollars because an incorrect call is made, I think that begs very, very serious questions. Like, I know what non-bettors will say. Well, then just don't bet. But when you have this, I mean, we're talking about billions of dollars.
It's pervasive. I mean, yeah, it's
billions of dollars. And I just feel like that there's got to be more of a concerted effort to get this thing more consistent.
I do. Yeah, I do too. And it's, I don't know, someone suggested, well, take the pitch clock out of the home plate umpire's hands and give it to one of the other guys instead. So one of the base umpires, right? And I get that, but at the same time, you got to remember the pitcher's not looking at the other umpires.
Right.
Pitcher's not looking at the first base umpire or the third base umpire. He's looking at the home plate umpire. So you don't want a pitcher, mid windup, and then all of a sudden you hear somebody yelling behind him, no, wait, hold on, no pitch. And then, hurts himself as he's trying to deliver a ball. So, I mean, I get it. So that's maybe the combination of the two is necessary. I mean, I know that they're looking at using the robots. I don't necessarily know if they're going to go full bore to it, but I do think there can be a hybrid, kind of like you have in tennis, where you have the home plate umpires calling it, and if you think that there's one that's borderline and you want to challenge it, it's a quick 5-second thing and look at it.
Right, like, you get the ball and strike, and I don't know, you get 5 of them. Like, I think there's some allotment to the dugout where it's like a buzzer.
Yeah.
And then the tech comes in, and there's no meeting, there's no stopping, there's no taking off the equipment. It's buzz. Nope, I got it wrong. It's actually a strike. Move on. I mean, it can be done instantly.
Yeah. I think that hybrid type thing would work, but you can't. Yeah, it can't keep going like this. It just can't.
Now, you can't have umpires miss 15 calls a game. You just can't.
It's too much. It's just too much. It's outrageous at this point. And it's not just, it's not just the normal the usual suspects either, Bob. It's not just the same 3 guys that everybody bitches about that they're bad behind the plate. It's almost every umpire, almost every game. And you're right. It's their lack. They cannot focus on what they need, what their job is, because they're so worried about everything else. Not to mention the circus act that you experienced in person on Wednesday that took place with the Rojas Kimbrel nonsense. I mean, that I don't know what the hell those umpires were doing, but I mean, like, come on, man, get it right, get it figured out. Like, you can't.
I'm surprised Rob remained in the game. I thought he was going to come out and body slam someone.
Yeah, it was unbelievable.
All of that, and then you get on the mound, and then you get the ball. You get that automatic ball on the delay. I mean, it was
the batter is baiting the pitcher
yes
into doing this to try and get him an automatic ball. You're continually warning the batter about it, and then call the ball on the pitcher anyway. Like,
do you think there's any situation where you get to the postseason and they just say, we're not going to do this?
Yes, I do. I do think that that's a possibility, because I think what's coming, and this will be the last thing. We'll wrap it up on this. I think what's coming is and Aaron Nola said this to me. Wait till it's 95 degrees and muggy and hot, and we're throwing out a ball every other pitch, and see how long these games get, and the like. And like they're gonna try and control the length of game a little bit, and it's gonna make it even worse.
I actually was gonna bring that up. I said I wonder to what degree the players start to look at each other and say, like, let's slow this down to the degree we can.
Yeah. I mean, the game was long. I mean, think about how long was the game Wednesday?
3.5.
Okay, and that was only went one extra inning, right? It went 10 innings and it went 3.5. And now, of course, everybody will say, "Well, last year it would have been 4.5." And you're right, it would have been. It would have been 4.5, but they're already slowing the game down.
And you know what? I would have liked it. I would have liked it if it was 4.5. Up at 9-10, the game's over. I'm only on when I'm not working. I'm working when I'm not down there.
Yeah.
And I, you got to unwind a little bit. You got two young kids at home, and you're only on your second beer, and it's the 9th inning. I mean, what the hell is that?
Love it. I love it. Come on now.
Like 10-20 finish, right? Like,
that's right.
Another hour. Let me get the third and fourth one before it's over. I don't want to drink my third beer and watch Ben Davis tell me something I already know. Come on.
By the way, last thing on that. You're going into the Braves series. Like, this is the series I think that if you're talking about casual fans finally tuning into the Phillies or whatever, and you got it's Braves, right? This is first big series of the year, and you went with the third guy on this series. That's not a good call, NBC Sports. And that's not knocking Ben. It's just he's not as good as either Amaro or Kruk on that broadcast. I think he hurts McCarthy.
You know what I want? I want Batalico. I want Batalico in the booth. Let's get him off the best damn sports show. That show, I mean, Christ.
It would be interesting to see what he would do in a game.
I would love to hear him in game. Oh, I'll tell you what, radio broadcast on Wednesday. At one point, during that exchange in the whatever it was, the 10th with Kimbrel, they're behind the plate talking, and so Kimbrel can't throw or stay loose during this whole sequence. And Larry Anderson said something to the effect of like, he should throw it, and JT should miss it. like Larry is definitely like. So my dad is 70, 75, right?
Yeah,
and we go out to dinner or we go out to lunch, and he'll just say stuff, and you're like, well, you can't say that, it's like so rude and so off the wall. And you can't say that. I think like Larry's actually approaching that on the radio. I'm like, I'm pretty sure that he just implied that a Kimbrel warm-up pitch should sail to the backstop and buzz someone. Like, what are we doing? He's a gem, man. He's a gem.
It's the best. It's good stuff.
I love it. I mean, because he speaks for the fan. I will say that. So
for sure.
All right. Well, here we go. 3 more games against the Atlanta Braves this weekend, and Anthony and I will be back to talk about it on Monday morning. You can follow us on Twitter if you're watching on YouTube, you can follow us on Twitter where you see there. At Up Phillies is the show count. At Ansan Philly is Anthony. And then I'm at Bob Wankel CB. Make sure that you do follow us on YouTube. Watch shows Monday and Friday. And you can also follow us along Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, anywhere that you get your shows. And we will talk to you next week.